All right, let's continue on with the Disturbing Movie Iceberg. I'm going to tough it through and I'm going to watch it. We made it halfway through. Let's finish the rest. I'm ready.
And get ready because it just gets worse.
Yay!
So now in tier 5, since every tier is its own category.
A terrified woman's flesh to my red guts. That sounds great. The gateway meat. All right.
Tier 5 would be that of like depravity and extremism. Like if you take all the branches from where horror originated and see French extremism as the root of American Grindhouse and stuff like that, this would be what would happen if French extremism just kept going. So while a lot of these are films with a plot, they mostly just exist to be as brutal as possible. Starting with our first one, Girl Hell 1990.
Hey, party like it's 1999.
This one's really weird plot-wise. It's about a couple of guys who like attack women a lot. And then there's weird elements in it like family kithing, as well as like this weird subplot with a home.
Did you say family? You did. All right.
As well as like this weird subplot with a homeless woman who seems to be nice, and then the girl who is being attacked kills her for some reason. Honestly, compared to some of the stuff in tier 4, it's not that bad, but it is probably the peak of like Japan weirdness.
Okay, part of me wants to, so I'm going to. I don't know if it's really out there or not, but if there is no picture, I want to see a picture. I want to see the cover, if they have a cover. See, I don't know if they have a cover or not. Oh, wow!
No, security!
Not showing that. All right, there is a picture, and you're just not seeing it. Okay. If there's no picture, there's no picture for a reason. I got that.
At least so far for the list. Ostermontag is where it gets. Hoo boy.
Okay, well, I know y'all can't. Maybe, probably not. But I am. Ah! Oh, hell. Okay, we're keeping that. You know what? That's the last one I'm fucking Googling. Hell no. No more.
So in researching this one.
Hey. Exit out that bitch. No. I'm not doing no more. I'm not doing it no more.
Hoo boy. So in researching this one, like people were talking about clips and scenes from it, like this isn't that bad. But then everyone kept referencing
Rabbits?
the end scene. Everyone's like, oh yeah, that end scene, that did it for me. That's one of the worst things I ever blah blah blah.
In sync?
And I couldn't find any info for what it was except for one message board, and I wish I hadn't. Basically, it's just further women violence in various ways, with things like needles and eyes, which is always fun, as well as with the others, fluids, and yeah, gross. Ostermontag is German for Easter Monday.
Okay.
Which I'm sure means something in the film. Again, a lot of these don't have English translations in any regard, so you just kind of got to guess. But I will say the ending was probably the grossest thing I've ever seen done with a knife, so I guess that stands for something. The next title, Women's Flesh, My Red Guts, is from Japan, as you could imagine. The plot of this one, as Spooky Rice covered, seems to be mostly about a woman who her man left her, and to cope with it, she just starts mutilating herself in creative ways. Now, what's interesting about this kind of movie, I believe Baroque was the production company that made it, is at the end of the films, they'll show trailers to other Baroque films, which gives us our first preview of something we're going to see a lot of in the later tiers, as they gave the trailer to something called Rare a Dead Person, which is random clips of a dead person or people's. There's going to be more depravity like that later on, but right now we're still in the movies. Tumbling Doll of Flesh is similar to Guinea Pig, which I mentioned in the last tier,
yeah,
although this one involves more kithing. The basic plot of it is a girl is hired to be in an adult film, and then they keep ramping up and getting her to do stuff she doesn't want to do until it gets to the point that no one would want to do, and she's killed and the guy she's with is killed, and it's a big blood fest. The more creative part from this movie was a scene in which the tongue was being cut with various cutting objects. I think a lot of people view this one so hard because the way it's shot implies that it was a real event, but it wasn't. There were actors and it was a director who made it. And
are all of these things he's talking about, they are plots and meanings, right? Well, I don't know about meanings, but they're not real, right? It's not too bad so far. So far, not so bad. I thought it was gonna be bad. Right now, it's not that bad.
Like, a lot of the effects kind of give it away because they do look really dumb, but I guess just the idea of it is enough to make people think, oh, this is some crime that we've got to do something about, when no, it's just weird stuff. Mei-chan's daily life is based off of a manga by the same name. Basically, the plot of it is a girl discovers that she has regeneration abilities, so she can lose a limb and then regenerate it.
The boys!
So a rich client decides to start renting her out to other rich people so that they can do depraved things to her, and she'll miraculously recover from it. Now, people have said that they like the manga as it's some kind of like artistic look at horror and violence. However, whenever you take that from a manga to a live action version, it's just
cheesy
kith stuff.
Oh.
All the reviewers said that a specific gruesome scene involving the eye and stuff like that.
You know, when he keeps saying involving the eye, one thing that's just going through my brain, do somebody put their parts in that? Like, you know, do they do that? Do they do that? Do they do that to the eyeball?
That it's held at, and that the effects are very well done. So, I mean, well done.
He hit his elbow. Oh my god. Goodness gracious. Oh, I think he hit his elbow. I don't know. I think when he was trying to do the quotations, I think, you know, in that process, like I hit the mic when I was trying to do that, he hit the elbow. Oh, okay.
So, I mean, well done. The Taming of Rebecca is a kith film from the 1970s. At one point, it was ruled by a government board that's apparently job was to review adult films for some reason, as being one of the world's most depraved examples of the adult film industry. The plot's just gross. It's your standard gross adult film plot. There are a few things that make it stand apart from your standard adult film, like mutilation or whatever. The most interesting part of the whole thing is that the director of the film was later arrested for shooting a man in an ice cream parlor, supposedly trying to rob an ice cream parlor. So yeah, good for him, I guess. He didn't kill the guy, and then after he got out of jail, he went to college and became like a software engineer, which,
wow.
Okay. The Necrophiles is a film about a zombie that is brought alive by a satanic cult.
Of course.
That goes around murdering and kithing women. The entire thing is on YouTube for one, and looks like it was filmed on an iPhone, but I've got to say,
what?
It's the funniest thing on this entire list. Like, at one part in the film, they tried to conjure a demon, so they just tie a baby doll to a string and then fly it around the room chasing people, and the acting is hilarious, and it's all hilarious. I think that the creator of this iceberg legitimately put this on here just to make me feel better. Like, if anyone is this far down and getting depressed and like destroyed by everything that they're reading, this is an alleviation from it. Here, I'll play this clip.
Oh, nice.
So thank you, Nice Guy Phil, for making me feel a littlest bit more okay with this. The one thing I would say that's like gory, quote unquote, about it is the blood effects do look pretty good. If I had to guess, they use like real animal stuff from a slaughterhouse to do it. So I mean, it looks pretty good, but the plot's so absurd and stuff around it so absurd, and yeah. Eccentric Psycho Cinema is a 7-movie collection that is based around the concepts of girls being kidnapped and then bad things happening. There was a lot of like review boards that I pulled for these videos because, again, I don't want to watch them where I can't watch them, and one of which...
Is there ever a movie on this list where it's the guy getting kidnapped? I'm just curious. You know, guy gets kidnapped, gets tortured.
Worst film series of all time, and I don't think that was in a quality way. I think it was in a psycho cinema way. It's your standard like torture flick where it's just like an hour of gross stuff. The grossest part is at the end, the killer always collects souvenirs from his victims, and they're always gross, so that's cool. A lot of these
Which one of the items?
Once I'm this far down, they just kind of feel similar like this, a guinea pig and stuff like that. It's just like, aha, how gross can we be to this woman for an hour and a half? And that's the whole plot. Gateway Meat is the final part of Ron DeCaro's The Bright Side trilogy. I looked into a lot of the Ron DeCaro stuff, and in this realm of extreme violent movies, he's kind of held as sort of like a good director, or at least that's what the reviews I read would say. All of his stuff is very intense with its depictions and the subject matter. The plot of this one is that there is a family of Satan worshippers who the father figure passes away, and it's now up to the son to open up a gateway to hell, which naturally is done by being as violent and as horrid and evil as you could possibly imagine. So the standard evil things that you could picture would happen in order to open up a gateway to hell happen. The one, I guess, controversial element to it is that his 6 or 7-year-old daughter appears in the film. However, the way they do it is shot to imply that she's there, although she's actually not, such as a still frame of her saying something and then cutting back to the scene involved. So even though it's edited to look like she's there, she's not actually on the set with all of these gross things. However, a lot of people understandably consider the very inclusion of it in any regard to be too much.
I was just watching the movie recently, Role Models.
This bitch tried to grab my joint. Language, Ronnie. My language is English. And this motherfucker tried to grab on my hang down.
There's this young man, and he says a lot of wild shit in it.
Honky ass wanted a handful of my balls.
Honky, that's racist.
And you know, at the time, I'm thinking, yo, this is hilarious.
Fuck you, Miss Daisy.
And then I really start thinking as a parent, I don't know.
Please, Danny.
Some kids see too much to me.
Also have to mention, for some reason, I don't know if it's a political jab or what, there's random shots of George Bush throughout the entire movie. Like, as they're murdering people, the camera will pan and there will just be like a picture of George Bush on the mantle.
What?
So yeah. When it comes to a lot of these, especially when I'm like this far down researching, I find myself asking weird questions about it, because on the one hand, I don't want anything to be censored. I don't want to get to a point where we can't talk about certain elements, but at the same time, I don't want them proliferated to a degree that this is what we think like art needs to be, or what we think shocking needs to be. A question that I find myself asking as I get into this, like, not necessarily where should the line be drawn, as in what should or shouldn't be allowed, because that's kind of a loaded question, but more so, what is the preferred line to be drawn, or what should we encourage or discourage in a society? I don't know, just food for thought. Tier 6 is entirely shockumentary.
The dark side of the... Alrighty.
Or as they're also known, Mondo films. And
Mondo.
what better way...
Hey, we get pictures again.
Mondo films. And what better way to describe what a Mondo film is than with the 1962 Italian documentary, Mondo Cane. Mondo Cane translates to A Dog's World, and it seems that the purpose of this film was to kind of push people into realms that they're not comfortable or familiar with. So in 1962, it was pretty rare for people to see anything outside of their bubble or outside of what their broadcast stations tell them. And the point of the documentary was to take that a step forward. So for example, they show things like open graves that exist in Mexico, radiation damage done to the Bikini Atoll in the South Pacific and how that affects the wildlife there. And a lot of it is purposefully juxtaposed with how Western societies do something versus how other societies do it. Like for example, it shows a dog park in San Francisco in which people are very cute and close with their pets, and then it cuts to a scene in New Guinea in which dogs are raised and killed for food.
I have a fascination about how the other side of the world live. My problems are not as big as I think they are. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if I could really do that unless I was raised to do that. It's different when you're brought up to believe a certain thing. Of course, it's normal. It's natural to you. If I was today put in that situation, I think I would lose my fucking mind. That's what they do. You know, I'm not going to go over there and start knocking on their doors and telling them to stop. They ain't my place. They ain't my damn business.
What y'all looking at? I ain't had no cake. Better mind your damn business.
The idea is kind of to like disillusion people with their way of living, and in that respect, I guess it works. There's some really weird details too. For example, it keeps going back to New Guinea since, according to the film, that's where the least developed group of people were at the time. And the narrator says plenty of things that you couldn't get away with saying today, like savages and whatnot. There are some interesting takes from New Guinea, like for example, it shows a woman who is supposed to be a bride for a coming man, so they just lock her in a box and feed her tapioca till she loses weight. But Mondo Cane did really well, and it inspired several creators to come forward later and start the same idea of showing documentaries that are about extreme things that most people do not think about, which is where the word Mondo Films comes from.
Okay.
Cannibal Holocaust, which I mentioned earlier, is sort of a play on the Mondo film idea. One of the most famous Mondo films of all time is known as
Experience the graphic reality of the up close. No, thank you.
Faces of Death. While Mondo Cane may have been the original, a lot of people call this the classic shockumentary. The preface for the documentary is that there is a doctor who studies death. Specifically, he studies how different cultures handle death and how death occurs. He shows it in a lot of regards, such as animals in illegal dogfighting rings and slaughterhouses in which animals are brought into the meat industry. The movie progressively gets more intense with it though. For example, we then see public assassinations, which are rather well known, along with other things like executions. It then gets into like animal attacks and keeps ramping up until we're at the point where we're just seeing police footage of people murdered on the street. Oddly enough, for such a low dollar documentary, especially coming out in the 1970s, this film grossed $35 million at the box office. Now the big deal with Faces of Death is about half of it was real as half of it was not. See, we're at the point now where we're not really talking about fake movies or setups anymore. We're into the real stuff. Faces of Death inspired a movie that came shortly after, known as Traces of Death. Traces of Death is a 5-part series that is exclusively videos of people dying. This includes everything from public suicides, such as jumping off buildings, to terrorist attack aftermath. It then shows things like autopsies, and the whole thing has a sort of true crime feel to it, as if we're watching someone come up on these scenes from just randomly on the street. When I talked about Rare a Dead Person at the end of Woman's Flesh, My Red Guts earlier, this is the kind of stuff that was in Rare and the kind of stuff you see throughout this tier. By the end of the movie, it gets pretty intense with images and videos of war deaths as well as tribal deaths, showing everything from cannibals to other ritualistic killings. But hey, the movie had metal bands make it an original soundtrack, so that's cool. Junk Films is the same kind of idea. Specifically, the guy who directed it is from Japan, and he travels the world just recording and photographing different images of death. Junk Films has no through line. Sometimes there's explanation given through subtitles that are put on screen, but other than that, it's just a random assortment of these clips put together. It's done in such a way as to portray death as a very objective thing and not put any meaning or reason behind it. Everything in here is shown from car crash victims to wartime tragedy, and even things like in India where they have open air cremation.
I'm over here trying to cover my ears and just realizing you got the headphones in your ear. Yeah, you're gonna cover. You're gonna, you still gonna hear the shit. Okay, now it's happening. Now it's happening.
Similarly, Buried in the Sand
Buried
is
It
a
All in the Sand.
pro-American flick of the war in Iraq. Buried in the Sand, or its full title, Buried in the Sand: The Deception in America, shows all of the stereotypical things you would expect out of an anti-Middle East pro-American flick, like beheadings, suicide bombings, and all that. It draws several parallelisms between the Middle East and Nazism, such as catching these out of context scenes of kids raising their hand up and saying that's an Aryan salute, which doesn't make any sense. And then showing kids in school and saying, see, look, they're being indoctrinated. And again, no context is given. It's another odd example of a very one-sided documentary and sort of serves as the antithesis to what Mondo Cane and Junk Films were. Whereas they portrayed death and evil in a very objective top-down way, both this as well as African Adio are very trying to get across the point that this one view is the reason this is happening.
I hate that.
And we've got to do
I hate
something
one-sided
about it. Orozco the Embalmer is made by the same guy that did the Junk Films video.
Embalmer.
So again, we have a very objective, bipartisan view of death and destruction. Orozco the Embalmer follows an embalmer in Borgata, Colombia, by the name of Orozco. This region of Colombia is particularly known for the violence and death rate that it has. So much so that several scenes in the movie in which they find the body are very telling of the area around it. For example, at one point a woman was found dead at a playground and the kids were just playing around her, not giving any mind to her lying there because they're so used to seeing death. I should also mention an embalming in the late 80s, early 90s Colombia is nothing like a Western embalming or an embalming you may be thinking of, because the whole process is he cuts them open, pulls out all of their organs, stuffs them with anything from hay to newspaper, and stitches them back up. The movie's very surreal since it's just a bunch of videos of that, them finding a body, bringing it in, stuffing it full of stuff, and sending it back out. And while it may seem throughout the movie that the embalmer's very cold or making jokes about the bodies and stuff like that, at the death rate that this area experienced at the time, and given his job, he kind of has to be. Death File Red is another one of those Mondo style series in which the whole point is to show the brutal side of the world. While there is your standard death fare in this one, what makes it different than the others is the living examples they have of sickness in the world. Like, sure, there's clips of self-immolation and whatnot, but what sets this one apart from the rest is the disabilities that are shown. For example, people with birth defects and children in very sad circumstances that kind of serve to just point a finger at it. Now, with junk films and Mondo Cane, this is once again a very objective look at it. Like, they're not trying to get a point across, they're just showing what's being seen. And the film doesn't do any more to hammer in a point rather than showing these illnesses and effects that are happening to people in less developed regions. And it's not like this is where you should donate or help money. It's again just showing what's happening. Banned from Television touts itself as exactly what the title proclaims, that these were clips that were supposed to be used for television sets that are not allowed for obvious reasons. There is a narrator giving context, but this is another one of the collective tape versions, similar as many describe to a true TV set. So the idea behind it is, say that you have an episode of Cops and midway through there's a car wreck and someone brutally gets killed. If they got footage of that body, then according to this, it would wind up on Banned from Television. And that's what the entire 3-film series is. Just collections of things that were supposedly meant for TV, and then something happened and they can't be used. Black Metal Veins follows 5 heroin junkies on their journey of heroin. This documentary was directed by Lucifer Valentine, the same guy who did the Vomit Gore trilogy, also known as my favorite director. I know Lucifer's active on YouTube. Again, didn't think I'd say that line. So if you're watching this, or if you ever do watch this, I don't hate you. I just want to talk. This, like many Mondo films, is a very objective look at what's going on, as Lucifer agreed. As director Lucifer Valentine agreed to simply record them as they go through this experience and not interact in any way. Or by interact, I mean call the police or something. Near the beginning, one of the 5 dies in a drug deal gone wrong. And then later in the movie, one of them overdoses and dies on camera. And there's, as agreed, no attempt to call the police or stop it. Other things are viewed, such as one of the junkies gets into prostitution in order to pay for the heroin, to which the camera just records it. While this can be viewed as sort of a telling of don't do drugs, kids, and just a very hard, brutal look at where drugs can lead you, specifically heroin, given Lucifer Valentine's other work, I'm gonna guess that this is just a coincidental benefit, and that the main purpose of this, just like the other shocking movies, is to be exploitive and just point a finger at something and go, ain't that weird. The Dark Side of Kith is another documentary that was produced by the British government. This one was specifically produced by Lion Television for Channel 4 and had Christopher Eccleston narrating.
I used to watch a lot of those documentaries. Not like that, but hearing people talk about that life and what they experienced from that and stuff like that. I don't know. People that don't do what I do fascinate me, and it makes me wonder what makes the mind do stuff like that. You know, it's no judgment here. It's just, I'm just curious. I just want to talk. I just want to ask questions. I want to know. I do watch, like my husband says, weird ass shit. Okay, I do. I just go in there, go on Netflix, go on Hulu, and click buttons, and I end up watching some shit that's just, never would have guessed I watched that, but I watched it, and I found it entertaining. Not that. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that movie is
another documentary that was produced by the British government. This one was specifically produced by Lion Television for Channel 4 and had Christopher Eccleston narrating. Yeah, the 9th Doctor from Doctor Who. The purpose of this was to be an anti-Kith propaganda flick that featured the dark side of the industry, from things such as STDs being prolific, as well as women and both men being forced to work. It got into the hard part of it too, which included drugs and murder and animals. One entire episode of this series was dedicated to Animal Farm, which is something that will be brought up in Tier 8.
What? Man, leave the fucking animals out of this.
That's it for Tier 6. So while
Alright.
Tier 6 was like Mondo shockumentary films, Tier 7 is exclusively
Oh,
that. These descriptions are going to be very short, as I both don't want to go into it and can't go into it. UNKB002. I'm going to say 2 words, and if you know what they are, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't look it up. And
All
those
right.
words are
I will-
coprophagia and europhagia.
all right. I don't know. I'm not looking it up. I'm not putting that in my history. It's not going to be there. I don't want to fall too deep down a rabbit hole because I'm trying to get out of this shit by October. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going that deep into this. I'm just doing this thing for Spooktober. All right? I'm making myself very, very, very uncomfortable. Very, very uncomfortable. Anything he says don't Google, I'm not going to Google. Let's continue on. He said it's short. He is right. It's short. All right. You're almost done.
Yeah. I should also mention that most of these are Japanese. Guso milk 1 to 4
Ooh, milk.
is the exact same thing as what I just said.
All right.
I should mention that this one has kind of had a challenge associated with it, similar to the 2 Girls 1 Cup video that went around, which people get their friends to watch it to gross them out.
All right.
I will
We
mention
talked
this
about
is
that
like-
in the last video. I mean, I didn't know that was going to get brought up, but hey, here it is. All right.
in which people get their friends to watch it to
Don't
gross
go
them out.
watching it.
I will mention this is like the pinnacle of grossness. Channel 309 is a Kith film that particularly focuses on the very hardcore aspects of it, such as
Bondage?
disabilities
Oh.
and
What?
demonic elements, like
Wait, what?
characters dressing in goat head outfits in order to conjure the devil. The entire thing is edited to look like nightmare fuel, like with heavy metallic and industrial noises and quick glitched editing and stuff like that. I should also mention that there was one website that was very like satanic and evil in its imagery that mentioned in the description for this video, because again, pretty much all these you have to actually order on DVD, that this was one of the most disturbed and messed up on its entire site. So take that as you will. So I think this one's on the wrong tier. Death to Kafar roughly translates to death to the infidel or death to the non-believer, and from what information I could find, it seems to be a propaganda flick from the Middle East against outsiders.
shockumentary?
So it's clips of like people being beheaded and murdered and executed and things like that. I think this belonged on tier 6 because it feels like a Mondo film and there's no reference to Kith that I can find. So that's just my theory. But imagine this as the opposite of the Buried in the Sand one I mentioned in the Mondo one, as it's told from the opposite point of view.
Okay.
Squirmfest is
Mickey
the
Squirm?
stuff I mentioned a minute ago, only this one has bugs too, like maggots and worms. So that's cool. I'm not
That's
even going to
cool.
say the title of this one.
Adam? Brain, you see the 2 words, put them together. So, in ecstasy, you're happy? Are you going to explain that? No? I mean, I wouldn't blame you. The words together is interesting, I guess. That's cool.
It's just that. It's literally a combination of those things, and it's horrible, and I don't want to live on this planet anymore. In my notes
Alright.
for this one, it's literally just a sad face, because that's how it makes me feel. Kuso Limitless is another Japanese flick that is all the things that I've mentioned before. Moving on. The Motel Files and Other Random Cuts is made by the same people that made the Channel 309, and it's the exact same thing. It's cuts of violence and grossness, with the catch being it's set in a hotel, and it's the exact same editing style and everything I mentioned for Channel 309. Saudi Scream is Imagine Guinea Pig, and I keep referencing that one because it's the standard for like just a video about a woman being tortured. So Imagine Guinea Pig, but with kithing. And then there's sequels to it. Apparently the sequels are like weird parodies of the Saw movies, where there's these traps. Only in this one they don't die if they lose. Yeah, you get it. Genki Genki. 18, 19, 21. So one of the sources I was using for all of these, because they actually talk about them, is horrornet.news, in which they have reviewers who watch this absolutely depraved stuff and describe what's in it. And I should mention that someone who has seen pretty much everything that I've mentioned beforehand said this was the one that broke them. So, cool. If you are familiar with my core Iceberg series when I talked about the Sabici Tomatovic tape, or the spider related one, I said that after she got out of that whole scandal that she got popular in Genki Genki. So this is the type of place that welcomes that sort of behavior. It's specifically weird stuff involving weird things. Specifically, and without going into any detail because I don't want to, 18 involves fish, 19 involves worms, and 21 involves frogs. Do with that information whatever you will.
No Vaseline. Oh my god. Okay.
No Vaseline, the great swindle, is the same people who did Channel 309 in the Motel Files. And it's the same.
No Vaseline.
People said this one had machinery noise in the background to be more creepy and like industrial noises. It's got the same demonic overtones. And everything I found is just like, it's so try hard. This is like if you had a group of like 17-year-old edgy kids who like set the neighbor's trash on fire.
Bunch of 17-year-old putting poop on somebody's doorstep.
Poop again! He called the shit poop!
It's just like a regular film, and then they wear creepy masks, and then they edit it to be real scary. So, yeah. They also have elements of like blood and violence and all that. And I get this is something you wouldn't want to watch. Just because you don't want to watch it doesn't mean it's like effective horror. But whatever. I'm finally done with Tier 7. I hated that. That's the worst one. Now we're into Tier 8, which is exclusively snuff films.
Ah, Jesus. Okay. Oh my god, I just read the titles and I'm just, oh hell.
Now, this one should probably have been in Tier 7, similar to how the Death to Kafar one probably should have been in Tier 6. But I'm glad that this one was in Tier 8 instead, because it's so special to me. There's the word, my attempted pronunciation of Emoções Sexuais de Cavalo. I don't speak Portuguese, I'm sorry. So I originally saw this and had no idea what it was. And then a good friend came along and helped. If you remember my Core Iceberg series, I talked about a guy who helped me figure out what some of the core definitions mean. That friend of mine, who I've met through Reddit and YouTube, John Callahan98, which if you see him in the comments or on Reddit, please thank him for this, is from Brazil and therefore can speak the language. So I send this to him and I'm like, hey man, do you have any idea what this can mean? No sources for it are in English. And he was like, dude, are you sure you want to know? So thanks to him, he informed me that this is an old film that was made sometime between the 60s and 80s. That is a Kith film involving a horse, right? Okay, so that's standard degeneracy, like whatever.
That's standard. He just said that's standard. That's just the normal, you begin with. Standard.
But what's special is why it was made. The plot's weird too. It's like this dude has AIDS and then he's chasing people around, and I guess it's to be like anti-AIDS in the 60s, I don't know. But the reason it was created is because at the time, the Brazilian government was under a dictatorship that censored all information. So their strategy was that rather than letting people make their own films, they're just going to make them for everyone. That way it's state-oriented.
Wow.
Which they saw that there was a market for this kind of film. So the Brazilian government produced, funded, and made a film with a horse. Which means it is state-sanctioned. It's so bizarre. Like, why would a government make that? And it's a really weird example of, like, gotta give the people what they want. But, like, do you really? And what's wild is that's not the only one. There are others involving different species, and It's so weird and so odd. Brazil never stopped being Brazil. Snuff R73 is really weird as pretty much no one talks about it. So every forum that I came across to find information on stuff for tier 8 was pretty open with talking about the other ones. Like, oh yeah, this happens and this does. But as soon as someone would mention R73, everyone would shut up. There were people in the comments of the original question like, you can't talk about that. Do not talk about that on the ClearNet. Only talk about it on a Tor browser, etc. A bunch of people compared what was in it to Most Disturbed Person on Planet Earth, which we'll get to in a second. But supposedly this one contains high production stuff made for it. In other words, people with money producing it. And by a lot of people who do sort of mention on the ClearNet, they implied this may be the worst snuff film out there. No, I did not get on a Tor browser to find this stuff. I would like to keep my existence, thank you. Speaking of Most Disturbed Person on Planet Earth 1 to 3, also known as MD Pope online, is what we're going to see several of called mixtape films. Mixtape films are exactly that. There's no narrative to it. It is just jumbled together clips or essentially a compilation video of these things. A lot of the stuff on this tier, if you're familiar with like live leaks, I guess wouldn't be that odd or strange to you. I don't watch that shit. If you're not, it really is some of the worst stuff you can come across. I'm good. MD Pope is basically just a compilation of stuff that you could find on shock sites. This includes stuff like the Mr. Hands video, animal abuse, the Mexican chainsaw video, and stuff like that. Also, you apparently can't find a copy of this on the ClearNet or anything that is in the darknet. However, one of the guys that I've mentioned in the description, Brutality Will Rule 666, gave an in-depth description of all of the clips that are seen in this film. So if you really want to know, check out his channel. But I'm not really going to talk about it here because, like, again, if you know Live Leaks, you get the point. Fubar is another one of these mixtape films. Another one of the guys that I was watching to keep up with this stuff, unboxed, watched, and reviewed. This made him throw up, which is saying a lot considering he covers all the stuff I've talked about previously. This one has execution shots and crime scene videos, and where this is different from like the shockumentary and Mondo stuff I talked about previously is...
You want me to be 100% honest? It's going in and out, going in and out. I'm hearing him, but I'm not. I'm hearing him and then I'm not. I'm hearing it's like my body is doing what it does when it comes to that, and just like, oh, I hear that. Oh, I heard that. No, I didn't hear that. I heard that. Like,
I heard that. I wish I didn't hear that, but I just heard that.
Yeah, we're almost done though. I said that probably like what 10 fucking minutes ago.
A lot of this is like in-person modern day, so it's a lot more intensive and gross with it. There's also clips of surgeries and stuff like that, and the thing I mentioned earlier, Animal Farm. Animal Farm may be the most widely banned film of all time. There were copies that made its way into the UK in the early 90s, to which the UK police had these massive like breakdowns and invasions to try to rid every copy of the movie in existence. The content of the film is Animal Farm, and supposedly they had destroyed every copy of it in existence until Fubar came out. In it, there are clips from the original Animal Farm, meaning that someone kept that quiet in enough time for this to come out, redistribute it under this hidden title, and then put it back out there. So this is a once thought destroyed film now put into production as something else. Also, I should mention, like, all of these are highly illegal because there's a difference, like, in legality between, like, having something that someone dies in and then having something that the express purpose is, like, unseen crime, basically. Most of these will catch you either a cheese pizza charge all the way to withholding evidence. So I highly stress, do not research, do not look up on your own, please. The one thing about this one that's really weird is in between the brutal, awful clips, there will be Happy Tree Friends episodes. Which, wow. All right, cool. I know I keep saying cool, but like that's my just default reaction to this filth. The Ogrish collection is from an older website known as Ogrish, which is essentially a mixtape or greatest hits of the stuff from their website. Ogrish rebranded in 2006 to Live Leak, so same thing. What's really weird about this one is that there was an Indiegogo campaign for it, which didn't have any contributors, obviously. There's just an FBI agent watching the Indiegogo page like, oh, I see that your mom 666 donated to the Ogrish collection. Interesting. That Gore Volume 1 and 2.
It's
Only
just that?
evidence I could find that this thing exists was from a French website, and I don't speak French. Supposedly this one is just several clips of body harm throughout and heavy metal played over it. And by body harm I mean like stuff that could kill you, body harm. There's also several like different videos that apparently claim to be it, but the original one supposedly contains cheese pizza, so gross. I can't say these names. I don't want to say these names.
okay.
This is awful.
Oh, the feet. Oh,
You can go back and
I
look
saw.
at the tier
Yeah.
when I screenshot it earlier, but
Yeah.
I'm not
I got
doing
you.
this one.
I got you.
It's a
Okay.
mixtape like all the others, just horrible, gross, disgusting things. It's again only distributed on the dark web as with these others, and it's live-leak and gross and evil and awful, and yeah. Finally this one, Registros Feitas 3. Sure. Once again, John Callahan 98 helped me with this one because all the results were in Portuguese. Not that I'm complaining. This one's also a mixtape of crimes against
Gotcha.
people and murder and all that fun stuff. The
Yeah.
difference in this one, I guess, from other ones is there's several factory and industrial accidents included that you would see on Live Leak, so I guess that's variety. And it, like all these others, is just further examples of depravity on film, set to music, in a illegal film collection. So, yeah. And
That's it.
we are done. That's it. That's the entire Disturbing Movie Iceberg. I'm going to go clear my browser, drink coffee, and cry. I do want to say though, when you get hyper focused on this stuff, it's really hard to recognize how put away and shamed it is by the rest of society, because whenever you're looking at it, you just think, oh, this is how the world is, this is how evil is, and it can really get you down. But I want to emphasize that you got to go looking for it, and anything that you go looking for, you're going to find. As depressed and awful as you want to view the world, is as awful as you're going to find it. And to get to it, you've got to ignore all the beauty that's around you in forms of art, forms of expression, forms of people. And yeah, while it's interesting to kind of poke your head into the rabbit hole and see how awful it gets, you got to remember to take your head out every now and then. So while it's fun to look at it, and while I enjoyed bringing this topics to you, because I think that there's always going to be this thing in people that kind of want to see how bad the world can get, I also want to emphasize that it's really not that bad, because yeah,
Not
the
all
world
that
can be a pretty messed up place,
Yeah.
but it can be a pretty cool place too. Part of that positivity is you all watching this video. For me, a small-time creator who is now having more subscribers and views than I've ever thought I could have or know what to do with, and I sincerely want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for watching.
And there we have it. We made it through the Disturbing Movie Iceberg. So there we go, Blaze Squad. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you blaze the like button. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, go ahead and give yourself a round of applause for even making it. And I will see you guys in the next one.